All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, students, whenever you're watching this. This is AP Macroeconomics with me, Mr. McRitchie, here on my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going over what is, for most students, the actually hardest thing to do in Unit 1. It is not when most mistakes occur. That's usually circular flow model in my class. I teach that in Unit 1. Most classes have it in Unit 2. That's fine. But in Unit 1 as a whole, this is the thing that students... Oh, I messed up my labeling. Oh my god. I don't have the right text in the top left. Let me change that while I'm talking awkwardly and effectively. But today we are learning about terms of trade. There we go. Whoops-a-daisy. Hello, fix that. And let me change the size on it. And I'm an idiot. And this is all live and happening. I'm not editing it out. Okay, cool. Yeah, there it is. All right. Whoops-a-daisy. My bad. So... we're talking about terms of trade today. This is the application of the higher level version of the absolute comparative advantage stuff. If you were okay with that stuff from that previous video, you will hopefully be okay here, but you gotta pay attention. Do all the work that I do, show all the things that I show, ask questions in the chat/comments when you got them, because boy howdy, this is a thing that people have problems with, So today we're talking about terms of trade and the idea of, okay, cool, we've got these two countries that can produce things. We know the opportunity cost because we did that with the comparative advantage thing. We know who's got the absolute advantage. Is there a way for these two countries to swap stuff with each other and both benefit? Because there kind of has to be, right? Like in the real world, America trades with other countries. We could raw outproduce most of them, but we don't. So why? Why don't we do that? Well, it's going to have to do with the idea of opportunity cost that we mentioned earlier. So let's get into it. So, specialization and terms of trade. The reason why I'm going to start with specialization is that that's going to be the focus of how this terms of trade stuff actually works. So, let's talk about specialization first and foremost. So, specialization is the idea that you focus your production into one or really just a few goods and services. That you narrow down your scope. The idea being, by narrowing down your scope, you can focus more of your resources toward that production, more of your technological innovation will be towards those specific goods, and you can get really freaking good at those things. Think in your life how, as you guys go from high school to college, you're planning on specializing in a particular major. The idea that you're going to focus on a specific academic field that you want to study on so that you can become an expert in it, right? You're doing that for efficiency's sake. You're trimming out some of the fat of classes that aren't really what you want to be doing for your career. Right. It's the idea of specialization. The theory for economics is that individuals and countries can, potentially, become better off if they produce what they have a comparative advantage in and then trade with others for whatever else they need. That is kind of the crux of what we're doing today. That it is possible, not guaranteed every time, but possible for you to be better off by trading with other countries. Specifically by trading for goods in which they have a comparative advantage in. The idea being, some things we make at a higher cost than other countries. If they make them for us, we might be able to negotiate a cost that is less for ourselves. So let's show you how that works. So, let's start with a practical example. We've got two countries here, America, Brazil. We've got two goods they're producing, coffee and wheat. I have to emphasize the T in that because I say things really fast and some kids hear weed when I say wheat. Gotta clarify that one real big. Wheat, what I'm talking about. Kids always trip up in my class like, what? Don't get excited. Okay, coffee and wheat. So, should these countries specialize in trade is the question. Asking you, the viewer of this video, do you think, based off this table, that these two countries can both benefit if they specialize and trade? Most students say no. They're like, America sure as heck looks like they can produce more of either good. Why would they bother trading with Brazil, country who bad at produce things? Okay? It's like, we'll show you how that could be beneficial. But first, in order to do this problem, we have to do the stuff from before. So first, input or output problem. As a heads up, there's no statement above this, so you can assume that this is the actual amount of coffee and wheat being produced. Who has the absolute advantage in each, and who has the comparative advantage in each. Solve that. To do that first is a nice little practice from yesterday's video, if you're doing this chronologically. Okay? So give it a whirl. Okay? I'm going to solve through it to prove that you guys did it right. Input or output, this would be an output problem. It's number of things being produced, amount of coffee and amount of wheat being made by these two countries. America for sure has the absolute advantage in both. I'm just going to put AA over here because America's got it for both of them. They can produce more coffee and more wheat in a vacuum than Brazil. Got to remind you guys here, these are either or options for these two countries. So America could make 30 tons of coffee max or 30 tons of wheat max. They can't make 30 and 30. It's 30 or 30. Brazil can make 20 tons of coffee in a day, or 10 wheat in a day, or some combination. Like they can always do like America could do 15 and 15 because that would be like halfway between the two, which would be fine. Stuff like that. I'll show you on the next slide how that like visually makes sense. So absolute advantage in coffee and wheat, that's us. America, woo, pew, we have the American flag, Star Spangled Banner, all that stuff. Yay, we're better in this fictional example of making stuff than Brazil. Great. Okay, comparative advantage in coffee and wheat. Okay, opportunity cost time. It is an output problem. What do I gotta do? I gotta do OGO. Output is the O one, so it's OG. That's an O, not a U. There we go. OGO. Okay, 30 over 30 is, okay, well that's actually just 1. I love ones where it's like that, where it's like, wait a minute. It's just 1 for 1. I don't have to do any math. You're dang right you don't have to do any math. Math sucks. So that's easy. Okay, Brazil. Opportunity cost of 1 coffee. Other goes over. That's a half. Opportunity cost of 1 wheat. Other, over. Okay, that's 2. Reciprocal of 1 is 1, so that's easy. Reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. That checks out. Who has the comparative advantage in coffee? That'd be Brazil. That's a very bright yellow. It's very hard to see. I'm going to use red instead. And then who has the comparative advantage in wheat? That'd be us. Because again, you can't have a comparative advantage in both. So even though America has an absolute advantage in both goods, they can't have a comparative advantage in both. Brazil actually has a comparative advantage in wheat because they give up less wheat per unit of coffee they make. America, though, has the comparative advantage in wheat because they give up less coffee per unit of wheat they make. Cool. Now, again, let's remember these combinations, that the United States has the comparative advantage in wheat and that Brazil has the comparative advantage in coffee, because the idea for specialization in trade is that countries should specialize in what they have a comparative advantage in trade. So in order for me to see if they should specialize in trade, I have to know what they would specialize in trade in to sort of like test it. So if I'm testing it, it would be America making wheat and Brazil making coffee. Stay on board. All right, so closing out of that example. Here is another way to present the information so that that combination idea makes more sense. You could very easily see your combinations presented as a production possibilities curve. It's 2 goods. Those things in the chart were maximums. So the idea is America can make 30 coffee or 30 wheat or any combination in between. Luckily, it's a 1-for-1 deal, so it's pretty easy to figure out, like, oh, they could make 15 and 15 as like a fairly reasonable combination of both. Brazil can make 20 or 10 or any combination in between, so like 5 and 10 would be their half point right there. These are just different combinations that they could produce if they were making things on their own. Okay. So I've already determined the comparative advantage, but here is just sort of the step-by-step process for how we did that. If you need it in visual-like format and steps, if you're a steps person, feel free to write these down. Set up the problem with your numbers. Identify the production maximums, which we got 30, 30, 20, and 10. Identify the opportunity costs, 1, 1/2, 1, 2. Lower opportunity costs, who's got the comparative advantage. Coffee, Brazil, US wheat. This isn't new. This is exactly what I did by doing like the drawing stuff. This is just in my PowerPoints for kids who don't get to see me draw it, so there's actual steps done they can see. Okay, now, this slide, let me make myself pretty much invisible because this is a lot of text on the slide. This is not necessarily a skill the AP exam makes you utilize. I'm going to warn you about this right now. It's a thing that, depending on who your economics teacher is, they might not even show you, but I want to. You don't necessarily need to write this down, but just listen carefully, and I can prove to you the idea that, hey, these 2 countries could be better off if they were to specialize in trade. And you're like, there's no way America can make more. How would America benefit? Let me show you. So let's say on their own, America decides to make this combination, 12 and 18. They could do that. That's a 1-for-1 deal. That combination, I can already tell you, I could prove to you, but I can just tell you, would be on their production possibilities curve. It is a maximum. They make 12 and 18 wheat. Say that's their combination. Say Brazil does 4 and 8. 4 coffee, 8 wheat. That would also be on their curve. It would just be pretty far along their x-axis. Okay. What I'm going to do is the idea of specialization in trade is that when you're specializing in trading, you're kind of combining your totals and then redistributing them between the 2. So total before specialization. Between the 2 places, they make 16 total units of coffee and 26 total units of wheat, right? If they were to have specialized, listen very carefully, if they were to have specialized, the United States would have made the wheat, Brazil would have made the coffee. Look at your table that hopefully you wrote down or drew down. If you didn't, go back in the video, do write that table down. Or the production possibilities curve. How much would they be able to produce if they produced their maximums? If Brazil just made coffee, how much coffee can Brazil make? 20. That's their max. And if the United States just makes wheat, how much wheat can the U.S. produce? 30. So they're getting 20 units of coffee from Brazil and 30 units of wheat from the United States. Look at that already. What's better? Them doing things on their own or them working together and making what they have a comparative advantage in? It sure looks to me that if they were to specialize, they get 4 more coffee between the two of them and 4 more wheat. Because Brazil is still pretty good at producing coffee, right? They can make 20 units of coffee. That isn't like holistically an insanely much lower number than the United States. And because they have such a low opportunity cost of it, they're barely, like whenever they're making this wheat, they're barely making any coffee. So if they were to decide to work together, if America and Brazil were to work together, if America decided, hey, Brazil, we make the wheat, you make the coffee, let's split the difference and combine, they could actually benefit and gain. This is why countries do trade with countries that have lower production maximums, because even though the Ivory Coast can't produce as much chocolate as we could if we just made chocolate, them pretty much just making chocolate and us making what we make, we can swap stuff around and actually benefit. Now, here's the skill you have to be able to do for the AP exam, the terms of trade thing. So gains from trade, the thing on the previous slide, like the math of that, you don't necessarily have to worry about being able to do. That's just to show you oh, mathematically they actually could have benefited there. God, I didn't think they could, but they can. Wow, crazy. Okay, this is the actual skill, which is, all right, say they do. What would be a good trade for both countries? What would be a mutually beneficial trade? In this case, I'm giving you it as 1 wheat. Here are some steps to go down. The first step is to identify the original opportunity costs similar to the term of trade. The term of trade is a trade for 1 wheat. I'm going to grab the opportunity costs for 1 wheat for each country. The reason being is, in the United States, every time they wanted a wheat, they had to give up 1 coffee. Every time Brazil wanted a wheat, they had to give up 2 coffee. And vice versa. Like if the United States wanted 1 coffee, they had to give up 1 wheat. If Brazil wanted 2 coffee, they had to give up 1 wheat. These are 2-sided equations. The idea being, a good trade will be one that benefits both countries. I need to be able to think about which country benefits from what. So here's what I'll do. We already mentioned who will specialize in trade. So my trade is going to be some combination of coffee for 1 wheat, because it says the trade is for 1 wheat. Right, so some amount of coffee for 1 wheat is my trade. What I have to know, a very important thing to know, is who is trading what. This is a trade for 1 wheat from where? I actually know the answer to that question already because of the idea of specialization. You specialize in what you have a comparative advantage in. Now remember, America had the comparative advantage in wheat, so I'm going to use a yellow box for America. So this is some amount of coffee from Brazil. I'll use a blue box for Brazil because B is blue, B is Brazil. It's going to be some amount of coffee from Brazil for 1 wheat from the United States. Again, the trade said it's 1 wheat. I know that since America has the comparative advantage in wheat, that's technically from the United States. The reason why I want to know that is it's going to help me understand what would be a good trade. Here's what I mean. This was America's deal before. That in their own borders, whenever they gave up a wheat, they got back a coffee. So in order for it to be a good trade for the United States, what does it have to be? It has to be greater than 1 coffee, right? They used to give up 1 for 1. Now they're giving up 1. For it to be beneficial, America has to be getting back more than 1. So as long as this number is greater than 1, America would be doing better than before, right? Because they used to give up 1 for 1. Now they're sending 1 to Brazil. Brazil is sending them X amount back. all that x has to be is greater than 1. If it's 1.5, then America is getting an extra half unit of coffee per unit of wheat compared to what they were doing before. That's a good trade for the United States. For Brazil, and this is the big thing that students struggle with, what you have to realize is I'm not reading this as, oh, well, they're going to want, as much coffee as possible too. It's like, no, no, no. Listen very carefully. The trade is some coffee from Brazil for 1 wheat from the United States. Brazil's giving up coffee. Brazil used to give up 2 coffee for 1 wheat. In order for it to be a good deal for Brazil, what does that number have to be? Less than 2. Because they're giving up coffee. So it needs to be less than 2 for it to be good for Brazil, because that way it's less costly. They're still getting 1 wheat no matter what. They would like to be giving up less for it to be beneficial for them. For the United States giving up wheat, they want to be gaining more for it to be beneficial from them. So here's the reason why I write it like this, the reason why the setup is you want to sort of set up the opportunity cost is because this is a set of ratios. And the limits of the ratios are the range for the term of trade. If the number is between these 2 opportunity costs, it will be a mutually beneficial term of trade. So let's go with 1.5, and I can explain how that's good for both. For this, the most important thing to do is to listen. To listen, to focus, to see if it makes sense to you. Obviously, you should be writing down all of this stuff, including the stuff I'm writing on the slide. If you don't do that when you take notes in math class, I don't know how you pass math. So, yeah, this is all math logic anyway. So here's the brain logic for this. Trades for 1 wheat. U.S. used to give up 1 wheat for 1 coffee within its own borders. It was a 1-for-1 deal within its own borders. They could move up and down that line 1 for 1. Now they're trading 1 wheat to Brazil, again, because they specialized in wheat, so this is 1 wheat from the United States, and Brazil's sending them 1.5 units of coffee. Better. Straight up better. 1,000% better. Okay, they're getting 50% more than they used to because Brazil's sending them that amount. You're like, man, Brazil must be getting screwed over here. No, they're not, because here's Brazil's thing. In order to get 1 wheat before, Brazil had to give up 2 coffee. Now they're sending 1.5 coffee to the United States and getting 1 unit of wheat. That's also good for Brazil. Brazil's benefiting because they're giving up less. They're both winning because Brazil's giving up less and the U.S. is gaining more. Because of this range, because of this gap between their opportunity costs, there exists a space in which both can benefit. Where one side can be gaining more than before and the other side could be giving up less than before. So when you're doing a term of trade problem, here's the general steps that I take. I grab the opportunity costs similar to the term. 1 coffee for 1 wheat, 2 coffee for 1 wheat, because it's a trade for 1 wheat, right? I then make sure I know who is specializing in what. Make sure you know who specializes in which good. You should have already known that going into it because it's whoever has the comparative advantage. But if you don't, make sure you do. And then I like to do this little boxy thing to help myself out, to keep track of, wait, who do I need to be focusing on? Well, it's like either I use different colors or I use different shapes, like squares for the United States, circles for Brazil, or triangles and squares. Whatever I can do based on whatever utensil I've got. If I got a pen or pencil like on the AP exam where I won't have multiple colors, I'll use squares and circles. And I'll write off to the side like US, square, Brazil, circle. So I can think like, okay, so this is 1 wheat from America and X amount of coffee from Brazil. So then when I'm comparing to their opportunity costs, I can be like, okay, so it has to be better for the United States. They need to be gaining. It needs to be less for Brazil because they're giving up the coffee. Because perspective matters. And then anything in between the ratio is good. Could be 1.75, could be 1.0001. Anything in between 1 and 2 will be mutually beneficial. It's just 1.5 is like equally beneficial, which they don't specify on if they want like the most mutually beneficial trade. That could have been any number. As a means of practicing this idea, let's do this exact same thing again. Let me scroll back up to blank. I'm just going to change this from 1 wheat to 1 coffee. That way we don't have to do any extra work. is to trade for one coffee. If you think you understood what to do, try and do it. If you want to watch me do it one more time with this, and I'm going to write everything and have no text appear on the screen, let's pay attention. So the first step I got to do is I got to use the opportunity cost of one coffee. So my opportunity costs of one coffee were 1 wheat, which was America's, and 1/2 a wheat, which was Brazil's. So I'm going to write off to here, US and Brazil. Just gonna write bra, who cares? So 1 for 1 and 1/2 for 1. Okay, it needs to be a mutually beneficial term of trade. So the trade is going to be 1 coffee for, oh, whoopsie daisy. Already wrote something wrong. Classic me. 1 coffee for some amount of wheat. And I need to know who is giving up what. Remember, Brazil specializes in coffee. So I'm going to use the box in the circle for this one. Box and circle. So Brazil is giving up the coffee. So I'm going to be boxing coffee for Brazil, and then the box, because it's, again, Brazil's coffee in the problem. I'm going to be circling wheat for the United States so I can help myself with my perspectives. Now, here's what I do. Any number in between 1 and 1/2 will work. I will plug in any number in between 1 and 1/2, and then I'm going to use words to check out the logic. So what's between 1 and 1/2? 0.75, which is 3/4. That's in between 1 and 1/2. So let's go with 0.75. So here's how I'm going to logic it. The U.S. used to give up 1 wheat for 1 coffee. Now the U.S. is giving up 0.75 wheat for 1 coffee. Is that good for the United States? Yes, because they're giving up wheat. By circling, I know how to phrase it. What I've circled here is what I'm giving up. U.S. is giving up wheat for coffee. Cool. They're giving up less wheat for coffee. So that is good for the United States. Brazil is giving up coffee for wheat. They used to give up 1 coffee for 1/2 wheat. Now they're giving up 1 coffee for 0.75 wheat. They are gaining more than before. They are also benefiting. The idea for a term of trade problem that you have to understand what the logic is that one side will be gaining more than before and one side will be giving up more than before. Or giving up less than before, sorry. Gaining more, giving up less. That's how it's mutually beneficial. Both sides won't be giving up less. Both sides won't be gaining more. One gains more, one gives up less. So when you're thinking about it logically, make sure you keep word choice in mind of wait a minute. Who's giving up less here? It's oh wait, because America's trading for coffee, they're giving up wheat. They would want to be giving up less wheat for the same amount of coffee. Brazil's trading coffee for wheat. They'd want to be getting more wheat per coffee than before. The way I know which opportunity cost to use is because the problem will tell me. It's a mutually beneficial trade for 1 coffee. Cool. Then I'm going to use 1 coffee's opportunity cost and go off of that. So I set up the limits. I set up the opportunity costs first based on the problem. I made sure I knew which countries were specializing. And then I picked a number in between the two and checked to see if it was good. A way to prove the idea of if it's not in between the two, it'll be wrong. I can give you an example of that with the exact same setup as before. Let's say our number is instead 2. So we do 2 wheat for 1 coffee. Asking you as the viewer of this video, who is being hurt by that? Which of the two, America or Brazil, is suffering in that situation? The answer is America. Because America used to give up 1 wheat for 1 coffee. Now America's giving up 2 wheat for 1 coffee. They're getting the same as before. They're giving up twice as much. Bad for the United States. This would freaking rock for Brazil. Because Brazil used to give up 1 for 1/2. Now they're giving up 1 for 2. They're getting 4 times as much as before. That's freaking amazing for Brazil. So whenever it's outside of that range, whenever it's outside of the opportunity cost range that's built up, it will still benefit one of the two countries. It will just actively screw over the other country. So in between the two opportunity costs, beneficial for both. Outside the opportunity cost, it will be beneficial for one of them. Okay. This is all the logic about what I was doing. As long as it's in between the 1 and the 2, it would have been good. So that's the idea here. So should they specialize in trade? Yes. Based on the idea of, 1, they could actually raw produce more. We saw that with gains from trade. And based on the terms of trade, there is a mutually beneficial term of trade they could come to. Well, actually, there's quite a few of them, because anything between 1 and 2 would have worked. But there is a literal perfect one of 1.5, where they would be giving up less on the Brazil side and gaining more on the U.S. side, which is a win for both sides. Okay, let's see if you can do it by yourself. So here is the FRQ from the 2003 AP exam. It's modified a little bit. There were like pictures of production possibilities curves and a couple of extra words here or there. But for the most part, this is it verbatim. Okay, see if you can answer all 4 of these. A and B should be based on the previous video over absolute comparative advantage. C and D should be based on today's video. So see if you can solve through all 4 parts of this. This is realistically the first FRQ I've given you that is literally from an AP exam, where you can now have solved literally every part of this question, even though you've only been in the class for a lot of you guys for like 2.5 weeks now. You've been in the class for 2.5 weeks and you can already solve an entire AP exam FRQ. It's a cool thing with econ. So attempt to solve this. Okay, now I'm going to go through it and solve it so you can see and check your answers on it. So assume that 2 countries, Atlantis and Xanadu, have equal amounts of resources. Cool, that does help me figure things out. Atlantis can produce 30 cars or 10 tractors. I'm getting out a whiteboard. I don't want to have to flip to a new slide on this so that you guys can't see things. I'm going to get a whiteboard out, and I'm just going to switch between the question and my camera so that you can see what I'm doing. I am just going to be creating a table for this problem of Atlantis and Xanadu, fictional countries. Xanadu is like a planet, city, something, space, sci-fi thing. Okay, they can make cars and tractors. Okay, don't make fun of me for this example. It was on the AP exam. They made this up. Okay, Atlantis can produce 30 cars, okay, or 10 tractors, okay. Xanadu can produce 20 cars or 40 tractors. So what I've done on this is, and I think you guys can see it just fine on that top right, so I've just set it up as a table for my production possibilities, for my opportunity cost stuff I like to do. So which country has the absolute advantage in tractors, and explain how you figure that out. Okay, well, absolute advantage is the easy one. Absolute advantage in tractor. Oh, first I got to figure out if it's input or output problem. It didn't ask me that, but I do have to know that. What are the numbers being presented to me? 30 cars, 10 tractors. Those are products. So this is output. It's the number of things being produced. So got an output problem right here. I'm going to know that I got to do OGO for the opportunity cost. I'm already on it. So absolute advantage in tractors. I look. What is a bigger number, 10 or 40? 40. So Xanadu has the absolute advantage in tractors. Now, for the sake of me not having to write like a full complete sentence with my mouse, I will say what the explanation is. You do need to have explanations, and they do need to be complete sentences. How you would explain this? I would not say because 40 is greater than 10. That doesn't tell them how you know what the answer is. It just tells them that you know that 40 is greater than 10. How I would explain it is I would say Xanadu, because absolute advantage is defined as who can produce the most given the same amount of resources, and Xanadu can produce 40 tractors while Atlantis can produce 10. That is the most long-winded way, but a very complete, very obvious, very direct explanation of like, oh, I see what you mean. Because absolute advantage is who can produce the most given the same amount of resources, and Xanadu can produce 40 tractors, and Atlantis can produce 10. So Xanadu can produce more given the same resources. That's why it says they have equal amount of resources here in the question, right? Like, equal amount of resources, ding, ding, ding. So that'd be my explanation. B, who has a comparative advantage in cars. Okay, I'm going to find the opportunity costs here. Opportunity cost of one car is other goes over. So if I'm looking in the table, I got cars, I got tractors. I go other number, 10, goes over my current number, 30. So the opportunity cost of a car for Atlantis is a third of a tractor. For Xanadu, the opportunity cost of a car is other goes over 40 over 20, should be 2. So I've got one car is 1/3 of a tractor, one car for 2 tractors. That would tell me that Atlantis for sure has the comparative advantage in cars because they have the lower opportunity cost. A third is less than 2. So the answer for B is Atlantis, and the explanation, which says using the concept of opportunity cost. So they're asking for some math is what's happening there. Explain how you determine their answer. I would say, since comparative advantage is who has the lower opportunity cost, the opportunity cost of Atlantis producing 1 car is 1/3 of a tractor, while the opportunity cost of Xanadu producing a car is 2 tractors. Therefore, Atlantis, by having the lower opportunity cost, has the comparative advantage. You could probably have also said Atlantis because they have a lower opportunity cost and then wrote C table if you did like a table with a bunch of work in it like this. That's the benefit of showing your work, is that you can reference it in explanations. It can't completely make up for your explanations, but if it tells the grader that you knew what you were doing, because like by saying because they have a lower opportunity cost, it's like, okay, so you know comparative advantage 2 has a lower opportunity cost, so I know you know the definition, check. And did you know how to do it? Work has been shown, check. If you didn't show your work, but you said in your answer the 1 for 1/3, 1 for 2 thing, then even though you didn't write out your work, you did write out your work in your answer, so I can tell that you did it there too. That's a good way to be aware of things for the AP exam. Just be aware, when it says explain, you do got to write stuff. You don't have to write a thesis statement, but you do have to explain how you figured out the answer, okay? C and D, that's today's stuff. If the 2 countries specialize in trade, who will import cars? Explain why. Importing it means that they are bringing it in. So what are they really asking here? They're asking who will import cars. Well, if you specialize in what you have a comparative advantage in, what they're really asking for is who is making the tractors. Because whoever's making the tractors will be trading for cars and therefore importing cars. We already know Atlantis is the one making the cars, therefore Xanadu is the one making the tractors. So if Xanadu's making the tractors, how I would explain this is, if they specialize in trade, Xanadu will import cars because countries should specialize in what they have a comparative advantage in and trade for the other good, period. Xanadu will be specializing in tractors since they have a comparative advantage in tractors, and therefore will be trading for, thereby importing cars, period. 2 sentences there for that one, because I gotta explain how do I know that that's the country that's specializing in tractors and why that means they're importing cars. So, a little bit more long-winded here. Usually your explanations should be like, if I'm imagining like notebook paper, like maybe 3 or 4 lines for an explanation is a usually pretty good length. And that probably would have been like 2 lines per sentence, so about 4 lines. Fairly beefy, but it's not like you're writing an essay. You've got 15 minutes to solve this problem. The math here is not particularly difficult. Like A should have taken you about 5 seconds to figure out, and maybe a minute to write. Okay, D. If terms of trade are such that 1 car can be exchanged for 1 tractor, they're telling me the term of trade. Ooh. Explain how Atlantis will benefit from such a trade. So they're telling me the trade is 1 car for 1 tractor. I'm going to use my box and my circle here. I'm going to use circle for Atlantis and box for Xanadu. Atlantis is making the cars, so it's 1 car from Atlantis for 1 tractor from Xanadu. Let's see how much work I actually have to do. The question only says, tell me how Atlantis will benefit from the trade. Does this question care at all if Xanadu benefits? Does not. So all I'm going to be comparing it to is actually Atlantis's. I don't actually need to compare for Xanadu because I don't need it to be mutually beneficial. So for Atlantis, the opportunity cost of 1 car, which we already found back when we were doing this question up here, was 1/3 of a tractor. So Atlantis used to give up one car for 1/3 of a tractor, and now they're giving up 1 car for 1 tractor. First, does Atlantis benefit from this trade? Yes. Used to give up 1 for 1/3, now they're giving up 1 for 1 whole tractor. They for sure benefit. How do they benefit? Well, verbally, kind of what I just said, literally, which is that previously or on their own, I'm not writing anything here, I am telling you what you would dictate and write for this answer. What you would write is, on their own, Atlantis, whenever they gave up one car would have only received in return 1/3 of a tractor. You could put like in parentheses, the opportunity cost of one car for them was 1/3 of a tractor. Now, by trading with Xanadu and getting one tractor per car, they are getting 2/3 more of a tractor than they would have on their own. They are benefiting from this trade in the amount of 2/3 of a tractor. Like I'm giving the answer everything I got. Like this is the, if you're like, I don't want to write them a specific criteria, it's like, cool. Do you want to pay $1,000 for this class in college? Or do you want to die on the hill of, I don't want to write like a long sentence, Mr. McRitchie. I'd much rather pay $1,000 to take the class in college. No, you don't want to do that? Okay, cool. Then write like a kind of long sentence. That's all I'm asking here, guys. It's not like I'm trying to beat you over the head with this, but it's like, some kids like, I don't want to write long sentences. It's like, do you want to write a DBQ? Do you want to write a long essay? Those suck more than this. The grader has to know you understand what's going on. Not just like, yeah, it's good for them because one is greater than the third. It's like, do you just know numbers or do you know what's going on? The grader is giving you credit if you know what's going on. And what's going on is, previously they gave up one car for 1/3 of a tractor. Now they're giving up one car for one tractor, so they're getting 2/3 more of a tractor than before. It's a freaking awesome trade for Atlantis. That's the idea. Now, this would also benefit Xanadu. It doesn't ask about that, but it would have if you did the full like range thing. It's one car for 2, and Xanadu's giving up 2, and like this also benefits Xanadu because they used to give up less they're giving up less tractors than before, which is a separate explanation you could have also done. Wouldn't have been necessary. The question only asked about Atlantis, but hey, just for the sake of like understanding things, there's some extra understanding. But be very careful with FRQs. We haven't really gotten to these yet in this class, in this video series, because we haven't had really the chance to. Be aware when they say explain, you actually gotta explain it, and you can't don't try and rush the explanation. Try to be as complete as you can with the explanation, because frankly, most of these answers are very easy and simple. Like the answer for A is just that 40 is bigger than 10. That's some big brain stuff, right? 40 bigger than 10? Whoa. That's not hard. For B, it's you're figuring out the opportunity cost of one car. Every time they make a car, they could have made 1/3 of a tractor because that's the ratio. Every time these guys make a car, they could have made 2 tractors. That's the ratio. Who's giving up less? Atlantis. That isn't very hard either. If you're okay at this stuff, it'll take you maybe a minute to do that stuff that I did on the board on this thing. Specialized in trade is just, okay, you specialize in what you have a comparative advantage in, so whoever specialized in the other thing would be the one importing cars? Yeah, that's it. That's all you did. And for this one, it's just, okay, well, this was their old opportunity cost. This is the new trade they're getting. This is a better deal than this because they're getting more tractors than before. That is not, on its face, very difficult. The way this question is going to make you earn some points is through the explanations. Because sometimes the explanations things seem like they're really easy things to explain, but then some kids do very, very little work, like saying 40 is bigger than 10. I did it. It's like, you didn't tell me what absolute advantage is. I know that you know 40 is bigger than 10, but why does that mean they have the absolute advantage? Oh, because absolute advantage is who can produce the most, given the same resources. Because if absolute advantage was like who could produce the least, which you don't know, like we don't know that you know if that's right or not because you didn't say it, can't give you credit. So be very careful when it says explain on the AP exam. Make sure that you actually fully, completely explain it. Usually, more is better as long as you don't explain yourself out of the problem. Like if you explain it like wrong and say like absolute advantage is who can produce the most given more resources, and it's like, well, that's incorrect, so no, you lose points. But you gotta explain this stuff and actually attempt to explain it fully. Now, I'm ending on kind of a low note there, but like criticizing student behavior, it's only because these are on their face fairly easy questions to get right, and I don't want you guys to lose points for what are ultimately simple mistakes on your part that could cost you college credit. I don't want that to happen. That seems very dumb. So that is it for terms of trade. It's one of those things that you need to practice quite a few times. I've got practices and I got worksheets, and you can watch videos and videos and videos over it, but it's a thing that you just kind of got to do a handful of times before it'll really stick in your brain. So I have a worksheet that we're going to do in class over this. If you're a student from another school and you'd like that worksheet, please leave a comment below, and I'll either give me your email in that comment or a place to drop it, and I can drop a link to like a Google share with that worksheet. So if you're interested in it, please leave it below. But work through as many practice problems with terms of trade as you can. That way you get a feel for how it works. The idea of, let me switch this back to the bigger camera. The idea of setting up the range of the opportunity costs, figuring out who's giving up what in the trade, and then comparing to the opportunity costs. That's a big thing that you gotta repeat a handful of times. The reason why I'm so good at it is because I taught this class for 5 years, 2 semesters a year, 5 to 6 classes each semester. So like I have taught AP Economics close to 50 times now. So I've had to teach terms of trade to kids in 50 different class periods. So I've got pretty good repetition of it. Like I kind of know how to do the stuff because I've had to do it an insane amount of times already in my young teaching career because I'm 26. So this is all kind of a lot. But you guys haven't got that repetition or that practice, so you're going to need to practice quite a bit. You can make up numbers. You can make up these problems too. I mean, they're not, it's just random combinations of numbers. Just make sure the numbers are easy to divide so that you can easily compare things. But any of the problems we did on the previous video, you could make a term of trade problem and just ask, hey, what would be a good term of trade for Zaire and Colombia in the canned olive oil problem? You could just go back and do that if you wanted to, because you know which country would be making what based on comparative advantage, and you know what their opportunity costs are already, so you can just go in and mess with that. So practice, practice, practice. It's always the trick in any math type of skill. This is for sure a math type of skill, so you got to practice it. But that is my last video for Unit 1. So for those of you in my class, start getting ready for the Unit 1 test. It's coming nearby. It's coming around the corner. I'll give you, in the next email I send out to my remote students, you'll know what the date is for that. For my in-person kids, same thing. You'll know the date relatively soon. For those of you that are not in my class, obviously that doesn't apply to you, but now all of my Unit 1 videos have been completed. I put them in a little different chronological order than what the AP exams breakdown is, because I think an AP exam they have absolute comparative advantage terms of trade before supply and demand. I do it after only because it's harder. And I like to end with the hardest thing so that I can review it and the kids can ask about it relatively soon before the test. It's the most fresh in their minds for the test, because it's usually the hardest thing for students to figure out. But that all being said, thank you guys for watching as always. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. It very much helps me to see that stuff. If you want to like this stuff or subscribe to the channel, go for it. I'm not monetizing anything here, so it doesn't make me money if you do that, but appreciate it. It does help me feel good, and my bosses like seeing that stuff, so go for it. But thank you guys as always for watching. Wish you the absolute best of luck. Thank you, everybody.